Welcome to Packet Pushers, the data networking podcast that repeatably, predictably, and reliably arrives in your podcatcher every week. The business value of infrastructure automation remains a tough topic to discuss. It's just a difficult thing to talk about when there's just so many complicated issues that you really need to dig at so many corners. But the business value of infrastructure automation is the hardest part. And the first stages of that automated process of turning the business around and taking it where you want to go is different for every company and for every team of network engineers. There's just so many areas that can be improved, and it's just hard to pick out which one to go with first. In this sponsored show, we're talking directly with a customer from Anuta Networks called Tata Communications. And they're going to be talking about their Anuta Networks experience and how Tata Communications, as a global service provider business in more than 130 countries, has been using Anuta Networks to orchestrate its MPLS network and the SD-WAN service that it offers as part of its portfolio. Our guest today is Peter Juffernholz. Peter, please introduce yourself to the Packet Pushers audience and tell us what you do at Tata.
Yeah, hi. My name is Peter Juffernholz, and I'm with Tata Communications for now about 10 years. I'm looking presently after their virtual network service portfolio. So here we are trying to bring to market not just SD-WAN, but also other virtualized services around NFV implementation, etc. And in the past, I've looked after the VPN environment as well.
Wow, managing VPNs has been pretty hard for a number of years. So you certainly, doing that manually must have been a bit of you'd remember the bad old times, I imagine.
Yes, all of those.
And I imagine that automation and orchestration for you is really a way to change the way this works. Like when I've worked with carriers in the past and they've wanted to deploy VPNs, that's taken them months to get everything set up. And that seems to be a situation which is ripe for change.
Yes, it is. And I think part of that is to have the tools of the trade to do that with the zero-touch provisioning, with embedding existing services, and running on top of it through SD-WAN technologies, for example, so that you can onboard customers quicker and faster and do migrations on a different pace. You also eliminate errors and faults along the way and simplify the way you can deploy services once the initial design is done and you have created, for example, templates that then can be easily applied.
Well, once you've got the design, then it becomes how do you repeatably execute on the design week after week? Is how I would see it.
Yes, although every customer is a unicorn. So they're all different, and we will always have to go through that process with them. But a lot of the large network rollouts last, or tend to last a long time. We are looking at rollouts that go 12 or 18 months. It's not unusual for global MPLS networks.
So to set some context for our conversation, Peter, we're talking with you about Tata Communications. They have an IZO SD-WAN service. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how it ties into Anuta?
Yeah, certainly. So IZO SD-WAN is part of our cloud enablement efforts. Under the name IZO, we have grouped together some of our private cloud services as well as our network services, particularly our hybrid WAN offerings and cloud enablement Private Connect into public cloud services as well. The SD-WAN service is the latest member of that. And what we have done is we have a two-pronged approach, so to speak. We have one approach called Select, that is a vendor-based architecture where we onboarded virtual networks, and then we have a in-house built capability around standard Cisco ISR and OS that we automated through Anuta to have capabilities around ZTP, zero-touch deployments, as well as dynamic path selection and congestion management that allows us to address customer requirements on their journey to cloud and hybrid networking.
So what I'm hearing there is that you're using Anuta then to orchestrate the setup of iOS devices using DMVPN and all of the technologies that we know and love today. Not one of these new fancy schmancy SD-WAN technologies that's all different. As you were talking about the Prime product, that's just the routers that we know and love, and you've orchestrated those using Anuta.
Yes, whether we love them is a different question, but that's what we have out there. Yes, yeah, we're orchestrating standard ISRs. We started with G2 series, and we're doing 4Ks and CSRs, etc. So it's really standard fare.
But one of the things about the Anuta product is the multi-vendor nature of it. So they have, or in previous shows, say back in show 301, we talked to Anuta about their product, and they were keen to emphasize their ability to scale across many, many different vendors. Is that a key factor for you too?
Yeah, certainly it is. So the Cisco story is only part of it, right? So in most of the deployments that we are doing, we have more than just a router. We have firewalls, we have WAN optimization services, we have multiple deployment scenarios, virtual and physical. So in order to do this, we certainly rely on the flexibility of the NCX platform.
So when you were rolling out this service to customers, every time you stood up a service, you had to go out and touch a Cisco router, you had to touch a firewall, you had to touch WAN optimization to set up the service individually.
Yeah, correct. Mm-hmm. And then also, depending on what underlay you're connected to, there might be other or different systems involved. They come with their own IP address management, etc. Right. So this is all something that we can sidestep by templatizing and automating that deployment.
And so you're actually offering proxy servers and firewalls as part of your IZO product?
Yes, so we have integrated our in-house managed security services. So we have managed branch deployments, so your traditional physical box on the customer premises. We have virtual solutions. We have inbuilt UTM services, cloud-based UTM services, and we also bundled with Zscaler.
Wow, that's good. So that means you're actually spanning not only a wide range of Cisco devices, you're also managing a wide range of security vendors all under a single tool.
Yes, but it is understood that the configurations are managed on our end, right? So partner integration is yet not part of this. So we are not directly interfacing APIs with Zscaler or anything like that, right?
One of the challenges I'm just thinking how difficult it would be to deploy routers out to a site and get them installed and configured and tested and validated. What sort of time frame are you looking at to deploy this? Like if you're deploying 130 countries and thousands of customers, you really need to have this much slicker than the way we've done it in the past. How long does it take to get a new edge device down on the ground?
So from a physical perspective, the delivery of the device isn't really changing, right? So what changes is the speed with which we can configure and onboard it. If we can run on top of an existing deployment, then we can have a device on site probably within 2 weeks and turn it up, depending on what if there's internet service already available, broadband internet, then we can connect using that service, and we can set up also some LTE-based services in the meanwhile until last miles are provisioned and connected.
So how long was it taking you before Anuta came along to get a service up and running?
So from a timeline perspective, the times that we are saving are multiple, right? So number one, we are reducing the time that it takes to provision the router itself on the network once it is even installed. We can compress that time from 60 minutes, somewhere there about 60 minutes, 45 to 60 minutes, down to about 5 minutes now. Because all we do is push a template towards it, right? So the pre-configuration work is also much faster. It takes the trained engineers very little time to pick the templates and customize them to customer requirement. That takes about a 10-minute time or so, and then it can be deployed. Now, the physical devices, as I said, hasn't really changed. What changed is the way we onboard them, and that we can also provide zero-touch configuration for this. So we can ship a device on premises, it connects to internet, gets its IP address, and connects to the controller.
So you've effectively built a cloud platform. So a lot of the other SD-WAN vendors are out there have built cloud platforms and they're custom devices, and they wake up and they connect to the system over the internet and then zero touch. But you've done that with existing devices that most customers would already have today using your Anuta platform.
Yeah, we can do that. Mhm.
Mm. I think that fascinates me in a lot of ways, because you can actually, if there are companies who need to build their own solution, and that the challenge to me has always been that so many different CLI commands that you would take to build a VPN, and really what you're saying is you've shrunk the entire configuration process down to a template which really just needs customization for what, the IP addresses of the customer or the naming conventions or something like that.
Yeah, for example, yes.
Right.
So it really, I mean, it depends on what features that the customer is getting, right? For now, it's also new configurations only, so we haven't really touched the onboarding of existing customers that we have already deployed or had deployed before we worked with Anuta, that are migrating from an existing configuration, for example, into the IZO Prime offering. And for that, we need, that's going to be available in July, as far as I recall. And that will definitely help us to, here again, to do the migration work after careful planning, etc., to roll that out and push the configuration instead of, device by device with an engineer doing scripting, etc. Yeah. Now we push it out to 100 or whatever, 200 devices at a time.
So that makes things like configuration audits and reconciling asset lists and things like that pretty straightforward too. So are you actually using Anuta to do your asset management?
No, we don't use them for asset management, but it does auto discovery. So Anuta's platform is discovering the devices in the network and takes the configurations that it finds, and that makes it a lot easier for us to then push the devices, push new configurations to the devices, because that exists. So we still have external IPAM and other services and inventory management, right?
Right, yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, those solutions are often integrated with other parts of your network though, right? Or you might have, as Tata, you have dozens of services and many business units, and there might be a system for inventory management that actually spans the entire company, I can imagine.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So you actually want to use that inventory system because the rest of the company wants to use the same thing. So you don't necessarily want. So, but in terms of doing things like role-based access control or, iOS updates, that's all managed quickly, like to your level of what you need?
Yeah, we can do this. Again, the Anuta platform is providing us with the capability to create audit trails and create the right authentication levels for that. Right, so we are able to maintain the integrity of the service and to document the integrity of our changes throughout the process.
So, did you consider? So, before you got to Anuta, I'm assuming you considered a couple of other different products. I mean, there's quite a few out there in this space these days. Which were the ones that you looked at?
We looked closely, really, at after an initial survey. We looked very closely at three different vendors. One was TLF, now Cisco NSO, right, as well as Glue. So Glueware was another contender for that. However, because of the timelines that we were looking at and the speed to have all the components with role-based changes and so forth ready, that was only really possible with Anuta.
So you really felt that Anuta was ahead of these other options? I thought, what about writing your own? I mean, Tata Communications has access to very large self-development team, and the ability to run your own must have been attractive.
To a degree, well, so that's maybe overstating it a little bit. We are still a carrier, right? And we are not notoriously good at building software. We have done that on the data center side. So there's a set of guys that have actually built their own cloud orchestration platform in-house that bridges private and public cloud. But so on the network side, we didn't feel we had either the time or the talent to do that, right? So the Anuta platform provided a nice framework for us to onboard that rather quickly. So because it's more than just having a few lines of code, you have to have a working UI, right? So and the stability of deployments that had been done, and the platform is around for a while. So the kings are out of that box, right?
Yeah, that's true. I do forget really, but we've been doing. Anuta's been coming on the packet pushers now for like 3 or 4 years, and they've been around for longer than that. That must have been a consideration.
Yeah, sure. So a proven track record of capabilities was important to us, right? And Anuta has done a lot of development, and they are really they have some really smart guys that know inside out what to do with network automation, and that was really one of the key elements. And they were able to convince us and demonstrate to us that they can deliver in the timelines that we gave them.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about how NCS works. Like the whole NCX platform itself is very much based around these Yang models. And we know that a lot of our current vendors today sort of have a love-hate relationship with Yang and their implementations of Yang. How's your experience been around model-driven deployment or model-driven device mapping or model-driven device models, and how you get down to the network? Is that working, or is that, how's that playing out in the market today?
We didn't see any problems with that Yang model for the task that we have taken on so far, and that we see to come up in the near future for our services. Right. So I don't really have much of an opinion on Yang versus other approaches. I got to say it worked. Really to the satisfaction of what we have deployed, and the integration, even all the way up to the integration with our self-service portal, right? So I have really no issues on the Yang modeling.
How much experience did Tata Communications have with Yang before you began your engagement with Anuta? Was it something you were familiar with, or did you have to skill up on it a little bit?
No, we had to scale up on it. Yeah, certainly.
Was that hard, or was it challenging, or was it just a thing?
Well, it's always hard to get engineers out to take on new trainings while they are having a day job. But I think it wasn't so much the skill set, right? It was really taking them out of the job and getting them a crash course, and then implementing it internally as well, and understanding what it means for. But we put the KPIs around it because it is part of our future, of our future as a networking company, to have automation and virtualization throughout our organization.
And it seems like Yang is the path forward anyway. Like the generalized support from the IETF and from the some vendors are embracing Yang wholeheartedly, and some not so much. Like our beloved security vendors, for example, seem to have forgotten what Yang's all about.
Yeah. Okay.
But then again, security companies live in their own little bubble, so maybe that's normal.
So I want to say, it sounds like you're saying you were confident that the network engineers, the operators you're working with, they had the capability of learning Yang. It was just a question of how do we fit this into their schedule while they're still doing their day jobs and keeping things running, also going out and learning this modeling concept and then bringing it into the workplace and getting it running.
Yeah, correct. So, the concepts were known, but obviously knowing something intellectually and applying it in templates and so forth, that took a couple of weeks to get them ready. But then working alongside with the Anuta people was very good as well, because I think that was the proof of the pudding to ultimately put those templates into play, and so the team is now doing their own Yang models as well, right? So no longer relying on Anuta for every change and modeling element, right?
And the good part about the models is today you can use a CLI, but tomorrow you can move to protocols like NetConf or gRPC or whatever emerges as a different way to configure the device.
Yeah. Yeah, correct.
You don't have to rewrite your entire program to take advantage of a change from, say, CLI to gRPC or something. It's just a case of building the southbound API. Talk about scale. What sort of scale are you sort of intending to get to with this, and where are you down that path now?
Well, I think the original scale that we looked at was several 100,000 devices and instances. So that was the the scaling in general that we looked at. The initial deployment that we have done is supporting about 10,000 devices for the time being, and we have so far we just begun rolling it out a couple of months back, and so far we have done some 250 devices with about 300 network configurations.
But this is also multi-tenancy? you've done 250 devices with, more to come, but also across multiple tenants. It's not just one big network here.
Yeah, that's multiple customers. I think it's now 3 customers that are onboarded on the platform, and the self-management and administration we are doing through our portal. So the customer portal has functionality built into it to make certain changes, allow customers to adjust the configurations. Right. For now, it's very limited. We only allow them to change AppQS policies and create or change applications into different application classes,
right?
Especially customer identified or self-managed applications.
And you mentioned earlier this CPE configuration time. You said it went from about 60 minutes per device down to 5 minutes per device. So you've actually measured that out in the field with these deployments.
Yeah, we did. After the initial ones, once we had the template set up and the team was ready to go and run, it was a significant improvement. We averaged it out, and the timelines are just phenomenal. I mean, it's so good to not have your engineers do manual work. That can be automated, and that can really make a difference. As I said, instead of configuring one device after another, here you just apply the template once and push it out, and we have so far detected 0 error rate. We haven't had really any instances where the configuration failed. If it failed for whatever reason, it was because the device was busy. And then the push is repeated and ultimately goes through.
And not because of the copy paste failed, or because the human on the other end got something wrong in the numbers or something.
Yeah, correct. There's no copy and paste anymore, right?
So much can go wrong with a copy and paste, and we forget that, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody puts too many characters in the buffer and pastes it down, and boom, or you paste it in the wrong order. So you've got this system built out. You've gone through the first phase. What's the next phases? Now that you've got the greenfield situation working, where do you go?
So the next phase, as I highlighted already, is to go to have brownfield deployments as well. So migrate customers from other services and onboard them into the SD-WAN service. So that means more reading of existing configurations and then pushing a modified template back onto the device. That's one of the next steps. Then we have also in the roadmap to onboard some application optimization services alongside the Cisco devices. That's going to be for probably for Riverbed in the first round. And then we also look at at building feedback loops and reaction that will allow us to do a bit of PBR.
Okay, so really sophisticated stuff. You're talking about building feedback loops in the network so you can start monitoring the state end to end from those devices and start making adaptive configuration changes in an automated way.
Yeah, so because today we can do this all on based on the CPE measurements already. We do application offloading, we do dynamic congestion management with adaptive shaping, but that's all living on the devices, right? This doesn't use the control plane yet. It doesn't use the flow information that we have yet. So, and that will be the next step to see how we can integrate the actual net flow measurements to trigger configuration changes. Yes.
See, this is always the stuff that I always wanted to configure, but we spent so much time just getting the basics done that we never got to play with the advanced stuff.
Yeah.
And
I hope it doesn't happen to us this time. So,
well, I think this idea. I mean, people misunderstand the concept of models. The idea is behind a model is that you say, this is what the device should be able to do, and you have this software layer which then turns that into a Yang model, and then you have a thing below the Yang model which says, how do I turn this Yang model into a configuration for this device? And that might be, straight over the netconf protocol into the device, or it might be through a CLI interface, or it might be through some other method of configuring the device. But the point is that the model doesn't change from device to device. It's consistent across the entire network. You just have some way of adapting it to each device that you're going to use. And I think that's the real transition here. And I imagine that you're on the cusp of saying we can almost bring on any device as long as it maps into the model.
Yes, technically yes. So the only issue is you still need to troubleshoot it as well, right? So
yes,
and you need to have these processes around it as well. So yeah, but in general, it's true. I mean, as long as you have the right model and the right adapter to the device, you can basically automate any of the configuration tasks that are required. And that's certainly one of the reasons why a flexible platform as Anuta is really helpful, because it can do that for so many different vendor platforms and devices and models around it.
So there's the technical aspects of putting an orchestration system, and there's also the sort of operational and human aspects of it. Did this cross silos in your organization? Did you have to go among different groups and get sort of a unified buy-in on this? What was the inside process?
To a degree, yeah. So because we have multiple different product lines, obviously, that are operating there. We have the underlying product lines, we have the CP management, we have my team, and then we have the security services, and I think the Cloud Connect is another product team there. So we, and across all of them, we had to make sure that we have at least a common understanding of what we are trying to achieve and what we are buying into, because there's also no reason for us to stop with SD-WAN and not move this forward to any and all of our Cisco managed CPEs, right? Mm-hmm. So there's nothing stopping us from that. It is just that the urgent need was around the SD-WAN services, because that's where we have more complex CLI work done. I think somewhere our engineers said that it was some 400 CLIs that they had to do across some different vendor platforms, vendor platforms involved. And, so that's no way to do this. And we have already in these deployments that we had done before we had the automation ready, it was, we already discovered that we have a lot of manual labor in there, and that causes problems, because mistakes are made, and then, repeat configurations are taking precious time away from moving towards your delivery target, right? So, and that was a very, very key driver. But I think the uniformity of such an automation project and the benefits that it can reap is definitely understood by other teams. I
just get the sense that you don't seem to be bothered. You just seem to say this was all pretty straightforward. It wasn't enormously difficult.
So internally, it was more difficult internally than actually working with the Anuta guys. So I got to say, they have done a bang on job, right? They delivered in 37 business days, and they are the most. No, I mean seriously, they are the most humble and hardworking people that I have worked with, right?
Right.
So
okay.
That's a very nice piece. Internally, yes, you have turf wars. Who's going to do it, and why is it only this operations team and not the others, and how do we integrate this back? But we had backing from senior management on it to meet our target deadlines and onboard that SD-WAN service, and that's always helpful. So
it's not too often in a technology project that the internal problems are bigger than the technology problems.
But that's what I reality is around this. The hurdles internally. I'm currently working towards the VCP services, right, and NFV orchestration, etc. And the problems that causes from internally, from who is talking to whom and who is taking responsibility for which part and so forth. That's a much larger and much more difficult conversation to have than with the technology vendors.
Sadly, we can't orchestrate and automate that.
No, because,
Well, I think that's just about all we have time for speaking with you today, Peter. Thanks very much for joining us. And I really appreciated you taking time to talk about your experience of getting the Anuta system into your network. I do sort of get the sense that you've actually haven't had too much trouble making the Anuta go, and most of your efforts have been much more spent on bringing the people forward into the orchestration and automation, perhaps than making the technology, do the thing it's supposed to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. And in the end, it's something that helps our customers to have a better service experience with us. And I think that's if that's the outcome, then it's all worth it.
And if you'd like to hear more from Peter, or perhaps get in contact with him, you can always talk to Anuta and about what his story is, and perhaps they can get in contact with him. And there'll also be some links to his social media profiles in the show notes. So thanks very much to Peter for joining us today. Now you can find this and many more fine free technical podcasts along with our community blog at packetpushers.net. You can follow the Packet Pushers on Twitter as @PacketPushers. Find us on LinkedIn, like us on Facebook, rate us on iTunes, and a range of other fine activities. And last but not least, remember that too much technology would never be enough.